Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. Joining me as always on Thursday morning, as breaking news happens, my good friend Duane Generalissimo Patterson of the Hugh Hewitt Show, master of the universe, HUGHNIVERSE.com, the troll-free web surfing experience for Hugh Hewitt fans and listeners. I'm a member. You should be a member by now. Duane, master of the universe, welcome back.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me back. Good to be back on the podcast that is soon to surpass Joe Rogan on the Spotify's.
Well, I would think so, but it might just be an artifact of inflation when I do. All due respect to Joe Rogan, it would almost have to be inflation.
Would have to be.
Almost would have to be. And inflation is the big story this morning. You know, we always talk about, we do your show on Wednesday nights, and people who belong there can catch us doing the live stuff there. But we always say, well, what are we going to talk about in the morning? And I always say, well, you know, God will provide. He gave us the 70s show, Duane. We got the consumer price index inflation rate, 7.5%.
7.5%, which is roughly translated to Joe Manchin will never go for the Build Back Better bill now. Yeah. Ever.
You know, just as we were starting this, just as we were starting this, right? I mean, I'm writing this up, and that's the one thing I said is that, you know, massive spending is now firmly off the table. We're now looking at probably the Federal Reserve having to step in with a rate hike like, 50 basis points here.
Half a point. It's got to be half a point.
It's got to be half a point. The markets are now sort of pricing that in. CNBC actually has a pretty good snap report on this as well. I just put a snap report up at Hot Air, which by the time the podcast comes up, will have been up for a while. So we'll see more of how this settles out during the day. Obviously, we'll be covering some of that.
But we've been on this sugar high. We've talked about this.
Yep.
All this money that we've just been printing left, right, and sideways and throwing out there and pumping into the economy. The Fed is going to have to start sucking some of that money back out and tightening up money supply. And people aren't going to like it. Now, it's necessary medicine. We have to do it. But boy, people aren't going to like it very much. They thought, we were told by the Fed that, we didn't have to worry about this. What's his name? Paul Krugman from the New York Times. He was saying we didn't have to worry about this. All those people that thought we had to be, responsible for money supply, it's an endless money tree. We don't have to worry about that. That's the new economics. We can just do this forever because there's no downside to it. Well, we're seeing what the downside is, aren't we?
We are indeed seeing what the downside is on this. You're going to hear a lot about core inflation not being as bad. Core inflation is still at 6% annualized. And what core inflation does, just to remind people, core inflation is inflation that doesn't include food and energy. Now, I've always gotten...
Tell me an American citizen in this country that the two things that they use the most are food and energy.
The reason why they do this, and I'm just going to go ahead and give the reason why this is a consistent measure. They've done this for decades. The reason why they break that out is because food and energy prices are more volatile. And so it introduces more uncertainty into the metric, but it's not that much uncertainty. And
that's like Ford Theater saying, is if you exclude the Derringer and the balcony, it was an uneventful play.
Right. The critics loved the play, except for the part where the guy jumped on the stage and yelled, "Sic semper tyrannis," as the president died in the middle of it.
Right.
Core inflation ignores the part of inflation that consumers feel on an everyday basis. Food and energy, you feel it on an everyday basis. There's no way to avoid that.
It's a meaningless stat. A meaningless stat.
So if you are looking at food and energy, which went up 0.9% in the month of January, that would be about a 10% inflation rate, right? I mean, it would be higher than that. It'd be 10.8%, almost 11%. Annualized inflation rate on food and energy prices.
This surprises no one.
No.
What was the PPI number last month?
Well, I forget what the specific number was, but that was also a 40-year high.
Yeah.
And we said it. You and I were talking about it at the time. Said PPI is a leading indicator. It means that the inflation is going to just get worse next year.
It means that the CPI, by definition, is a lagging indicator.
Yeah.
What we're seeing today is what we saw in the PPI price 2 months ago.
Yep.
Right.
Right.
So. Right. What I'm here to tell, I'm not all happy giggles saying, boy, this is great. I'm here to bring you the really good news. What I'm telling you is wait till next month. Wait till April, because it ain't going to be, we're going to look back at 7.5 as the good old days.
Well, I don't know if we're going to look at it as the good old days, because I don't think these are the good old days. I think we're going to look at, 2019 as the good old days.
Ed, the CPI number, we're going to 10% before June, right? I mean, we are.
Yeah, I mean, at this rate, yes. Unless the Fed steps in, they're going to meet next month. One has to wonder, though, whether or not they might want to meet this month.
They're not going. They can't wait that long.
I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't think so. Clearly, they're going to have to make some sort of intervention, though. I think
how many states start holding primaries in March?
Well, Texas does, for one. I mean, our primary is the first week.
A whole bunch do.
Yeah.
How many Democrats running for re-election want to look at this 7.5 number and another one that's probably going to be even worse next month, and the Fed hasn't even taken any action at all, and Biden is sitting here on his thumbs not knowing what to do?
Yeah. I mean, it is clear that this administration exists in a sort of unreality on a whole bunch of different planes, right? On inflation, on masking, which we're going to get to in a minute, in Afghanistan, in Ukraine, crime. Yeah, I mean, they're existing in this sort of enforced, willful,
all of it.
Yeah,
right.
the southern border. Yeah, and look, I mean, I think you can get away with doing that in one area, maybe immigration, because it doesn't show up at your doorstep every single day. It doesn't show up on your cash register every single day.
But you can't do it with all of them.
You can't do it with all of them at the same time. No.
And then come back and say, hey, but at least we've got peace in our time. I've got this paper that says we've got to deal with Iran. Now, it's a sucky deal. We don't like the deal, but boy, it's the best deal we could do because it's all Trump's fault. I mean, add that to the mix. Who's going to buy any of this?
No, nobody. Now, to get back to a point that you brought up, because I mean, you're ahead of me on this, because this is where I wanted to go. There's been some talk that Chuck Schumer learned a lesson. He's going to focus on narrow bipartisan efforts. At the same time, you're also hearing. And this was, I believe, in the Washington Post today. It was either Washington Post or Politico. I don't have it in front of me at the moment. That said that they're coming back around to Build Back Better, and they're trying to work with Joe Manchin on what he will support. I think we can say with reasonable certainty at this point in time, reconciliation's dead here. I mean, with one caveat. Joe Manchin apparently wants to use reconciliation to lower the deficit, to actually lower the deficit. He said yesterday that that's actually what reconciliation is for. It's getting your fiscal house in order. And if Democrats want to do something that will actually lower the deficit, he's willing to work on a reconciliation package. So it's possible that we get reconciliation, but not Build Back Better. It may be something completely different under reconciliation.
Tell me what Bernie's going to do about that.
Oh, Bernie's going to freak out. I mean, Bernie being Bernie, he wants it all. I mean, this is the same thing with, the whole Michelle Childs. I keep calling her Melissa. My apologies to Judge Childs, because I make that mistake repeatedly. Michelle Childs, where he's afraid that she's too corporate for him. And he's basically saying, that he won't vote for her. Even though she's the only suggestion on the short list that might get some Republican votes, and they might need a couple Republican votes to get.
So if we're talking in the next 30 to 45 days, roughly, remember Ben Ray Lujan, who we hope gets better from his stroke.
Right, of course, yeah.
But Ben Ray Lujan's not there. There's only 49 Democrats.
Right.
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 So what measure are the Democrats going to do to react to the inflation that is going on, that they are going to get enough support by themselves? Nothing. Right?
Nothing. They can't do anything. Right.
So the only thing they can do, Mitch McConnell could say, well, we've got some ideas of what needs to be done. And they could probably even get some Democrats on board to do that as well. They could probably get Joe Manchin on board. They might even get a couple of vulnerable Democrats to come up with some measures to fight inflation, right? There are things that they could do. Here's the problem with that. Is Chuck Schumer going to bring that bill up that a Republican group would pass? Or is he going to actually bring that up for a vote?
No.
Of course not.
No, because he can't cross Bernie Sanders. He can't cross Elizabeth Warren.
Which means he hasn't learned his lesson.
And honestly, I'm not sure you could get that through the House. I don't think you could get that through the House either. I think that Squad and Nancy Pelosi would keep something like that from going through the House. They would try to pork it up as much as possible with they try to lard it up with all the progressive spending, and it would die again in the Senate because Manchin is making it clear. By the way, it was Politico. I just want to make sure that I get that in there. It was Politico that reported this in a in a piece that's titled "Democrat Social Spending Dreams Stuck in Winter Purgatory." Being a highly imperfect and yet enthusiastic Catholic, I think I can almost assuredly state that it's no longer in purgatory.
Yeah,
it's been purged. The purging has already taken place. This is going nowhere.
And it wasn't an ascension from that point.
No, it wasn't. I think oblivion is probably about the nicest way that you can put this. Yeah, I mean, it's a good piece. I think Burgess Everett wrote it, and Manchin is. This was before the CPI came out. You can imagine what Manchin's going to say about this now that the CPI is out. He's
I know exactly what Manchin's saying. Manchin's telling his colleagues, "I told you so." Right.
Exactly. So yeah, this is going nowhere. The Fed is going to have to go somewhere with this. It's going to be unpleasant for the Biden administration because when they start dropping these rate hikes to try to corral inflation, what it's going to do is it's going to arrest economic expansion at the same time. And that is no es bueno for whoever is in the White House when the Fed has to do this.
How much debt are we floating right now?
What, 30 trillion?
30 trillion.
Yeah.
And we pay interest on that debt, do we not?
We do indeed. The interest hit on this is going to be massive. Even with just a half a point basis hike, the interest hit on this. And by the way, Manchin just came out with a new statement. Would you like me to read this statement to you, Duane?
Does it start with "Fool, I told you so"?
It actually almost does, word for word. This is his statement. For months, I have been ringing the alarm bell about inflation. There you go. Once again, we are witnessing that the threat of inflation is real. This is not a corner of this nation where hardworking families are able to, there is not a corner of this nation where hardworking families are able to escape the noticeable impact of this inflation tax. Inflation taxes are draining the hard-earned wages of every American, and it's causing real and severe economic pain that can no longer be ignored. It's beyond time for the Federal Reserve to tackle this issue head-on, and Congress and the administration must proceed with caution before adding more fuel to an economy already on fire. As inflation and our $30 trillion in national debt continue a historic climb, only in Washington, D.C. do people seem to think that spending trillions more of taxpayers' money will cure our problems, let alone inflation. I'd say that I'd say he's a soft no on Bernie Sanders' agenda. What say you, Duane?
When he's right, he's right.
Yeah.
I disagree with him on a lot of policy stuff, but he's pretty much got this down. Look, how much of our annual budget do we spend servicing the debt?
Almost as much now as we spend on defense.
Almost.
I think it's like $600 billion a year.
Okay.
The last I looked, and that may have been a couple of years ago, when we spend about $750 billion a year on defense.
Okay. Now let's flash forward to November, after the Fed has done 3 different rate hikes.
Yeah.
Okay. A half point, maybe a quarter point. maybe another quarter or another half on top of that. So
I'll predict that it's going to be 75 basis points by the time that the election rolls around. However they break it up, it may not be a full interest. It may not be a full, 1.0, but 0.75.
Okay.
I'll predict 0.75.
So we bump up the basis points by three quarters, right? 3/4 of a basis point.
Yep.
In inflation. What's that going to do to what we're spending on servicing the debt now?
It's going to make it skyrocket. It's going to make it skyrocket because we're paying next to nothing interest rate rise on that stuff.
Everybody thought it was free money, and it would be free money forever.
Well, and I'll say this. I mean, I don't know if interest rates, I believe, are locked in on what we've already got in the national debt. The problem is, though, is that we're about to spend, $1 trillion or so
it's not
over and above.
It's not locked in for a long term.
Well, 3 years, 5 years. Yeah, I mean, because it keeps rolling over, too. It keeps rolling over.
A lot of that is short to medium term.
You're right.
How much of that debt do we already have that is going to come due that we now have to roll forward?
Yep. Well, anything that comes due, we're rolling all of it forward because we're still spending more money than we're taking in. Yeah.
Right. So we're in trouble.
Yeah, we're in big trouble. All right. Want to move off of that. That's going to be the big story today. There's going to be all sorts of fallout from that. But another big story is that Democrat governors have decided that they're going to disconnect themselves from CDC and Biden administration guidance on masking.
Run away!
So, I have a post that will go up a little bit later in the morning based on a Washington Post thing. Say, why are Democratic governors going rogue on the CDC over masks? And I'm just going to read you a little quote from this because I have an answer, actually. It comes from Blazing Saddles. But before I get to the answer, this is the lead for this Washington Post article. There is much clear from the emerging fractures among Democrats on mask mandates. They have no unified metric for lifting pandemic restrictions. That's entirely backwards. The problem is that Democratic governors are belatedly realizing that the CDC doesn't have any unified metric for lifting pandemic restrictions. The CDC had a golden opportunity yesterday to roll them out, right? They called that press conference after 5 Democratic governors bailed on mask mandates. And instead of saying, okay, here's where this is the metrics that we need to, you have to have case loads under, 2% of the population, hospitalization, utilization has to be, no more than 5% above normal, whatever it is, right? They didn't do that. They just said, well, we just need to keep going on the way it is until we decide that it looks normal.
So what do you think about that? What do you chalk that up to?
I chalk it up to the fact that the voters have had enough. I mean, Phil Murphy damn near lost his election in New Jersey out of nowhere.
No, I understand that. No, I mean, why the special COVID briefing yesterday that resulted in no policy change? What do you chalk that up to?
Arrogance. I honestly think that Fauci and Walensky and Biden thought that simply going out in front and saying, you don't want to do that because we're not ready to give you political cover on that. I think they thought that would still work.
Possibly. We were talking to Jim Garrity this morning, our mutual friend.
Great.
Festival.
So much fun.
How can you not love Jim Garrity? And Jim and I were talking. He says, we're going to read this down the road a few months, maybe a year or two, but we're going to read that somebody called this meeting because they were going to pull back the guidelines. And right before they held it, somebody in the White House said, you're going to do what?
Yeah. I completely agree with that, by the way.
And pulled the plug on it and said, you're not changing a damn thing. So something weird happened there, and we're going to learn about that down the road in a political memoir or something. We're going to learn what happened there. But my guess is they wanted to pull back, and either a teachers union jerked somebody's chain, or somebody in the administration jerked their chain and said, no, we just messaged this today. You're not going to go and undercut the message we just sent from Jen Psaki. There's something weird going on there.
Yes, I think there's something very strange going on at the CDC. And what's strange is that they haven't yet figured out that their ability to dictate these things by
it's boy cried wolf, right?
By capricious fiat has expired. And expired with red and purple states months ago, right? I mean,
and
Texas
now it's expired with blue states.
And now it's expiring with blue states because
they're tired of it.
Well, not only that, but if you take a look at especially in the Omicron wave, if you take a look at the difference, we talked about this a little bit last night.
It doesn't make a damn bit of difference.
Mask mandates made no difference in transmission spikes between mask mandated states and non-mask mandated states. And that is what Democratic governors are realizing, and they're realizing that their voters are realizing. People move around in the country, right? They come to Texas, they come to Florida, they can get around. It's very normal here. People do wear masks, but they're not mandated to do it. So people can make the choice to do it if they want to do it or not. They can still do that, right? Even if you don't have a mandate in place, people can choose to wear masks, and it's fine. Some people are going to be higher risk and probably feel more comfortable that way, but they don't mandate it here. And so things are open, things are flowing. You can go to restaurants, you can go to theaters, you can do whatever you want to do. Then they go back home and they're locked in their apartments and they're locked in their houses.
So these brave Sir Robin governors that are all over the blue states are now looking at the political, they're sticking their finger up in the political wind and realizing, okay, well, this ain't working anymore. And so they're unwinding from the mask mandates. But as you and I talked about last night, they're doing it completely ass backwards.
Yep.
They're taking the mask mandates off of the adults who actually get the cases of Omicron and can develop the cases that are severe enough to be hospitalized and possibly die from it. The kids who have never been a factor in this, they've been a statistical anomaly. They've been a blip in this whole thing from the outset of the pandemic. Kids have never been a major factor in spreading it, getting very sick from it. It happens, but it's just a rarity. And yet all these blue state governors, we're going to keep masks on the kids because, well, we don't really have a good reason why, but we're sure we're going to keep the kids masked up. We're just going to let all the adults out of the mask mandates because, well, they're the ones that vote and we can't piss them off. If you're going to do this according to the science, the data, the statistics that are out there, you take the masks off the kids first because they're not the problem. They never were the problem.
They're not at significant risk, nor are they vectors for COVID-19. They haven't been since the beginning. And this is what I think the real problem is that the Democratic governors have been going along with the Biden administration for a year. I think if Trump had won re-election, the Democratic governors would have bailed out of this. Of course, a Trump-led CDC probably would have bailed out of it too. But they stuck with Biden because Biden's their guy. But the CDC has never provided a scientific basis for masking in general, especially not masking in schools. There's no science behind masking children in the schools. And so what happens is when they're asked to provide an off-ramp for, a science-based off-ramp for this, as Randy Weingarten demanded on Monday, there is no science-based off-ramp for it because there's no science-based...
for them being on the freeway to begin with.
Right, exactly. They shouldn't have gotten on that freeway to start with. So there's no science-based off-ramp other than saying, we've looked at the science and this policy is bad. And they don't want to do that.
The political science, right.
They don't want to do that because of politics. Because if they feel if they admit that they've been in error all this time, that they're going to lose credibility.
Then they're doomed in their credibility. And so their ego and their credibility is getting in the way of it's sunken costs. We talked about that, right?
Yeah, the sunk cost fallacy. Yeah, they can't. Right. They can't just dump the loss because they feel that they've invested too much into it.
Well, at some point, the American people are going to look at the Democratic Party as a sunk cost.
Yes. And that's exactly what's happening, and that's exactly why Democratic governors are bailing out of this.
Right.
You know, we don't have a whole lot of time left, so, and I do want to get to what's coming up on the Hugh Hewitt show. I do want to promote something that I had actually not heard about. The Hugh Cruise is back on the seas.
Yes.
Tell us about that and how people can sign up.
2 years ago. Yes, it was 2 years ago. Hugh was going to take a riverboat cruise. You fly to Paris, you spend 3 nights in Paris, including one night you get to go tour Versailles and have a private dinner at Versailles, which is, sounds pretty cool to me. Then you get on the boat and you go cruising down the Seine, and you work your way out to the coast, and you work your way to Normandy and back. And, you get to, go through a couple locks and all that kind of stuff, working your way down the river. It's a riverboat size, so it's not a huge ocean liner. It's a more of a intimate type of setting, but it's really a high class operation here. So AMA Waterways is the actual carrier. Well, it got canceled in 2020. It got rescheduled for 2021, and then Delta happened, and
yep. Yeah.
We didn't do the 2021, so it got rolled over to 22. Now, the point of this is in 2020, it was an election year. Well, Hugh's done these cruises every year. Right. Typically, the way the cruises go is it's Hugh's cruise. He goes on it. Now, I have done a couple of cruises for listeners on my own. You, of course, haven't gone on one of those. It
was a blast. We had a great time.
It was just more fun than a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Well, this cruise, because it was going to originally be in 2020, our magnificent czar at the radio network, Phil Boyce, said, you can't be off the air for 2 weeks. Okay. And Hugh said, well, then I'm just not going to do a cruise this year then. Well, no, we need the money. You got to do the cruise. We want the revenue. Okay. Well, that's fine, but you can't have it both ways. Either if you want me to broadcast from the boat, which I guess technically we can try to do.
It's tough, but you might be able to make it work.
He says, if we're going to try and make that work, I'm going to pull Duane along. And Phil, of course, said, but that costs so much money. I don't want to send Duane along. And Hugh says, okay, then I'm not going on the cruise. But we need the money from the cruise. Well, then I'm bringing Duane. But I don't want to send. So we had this round and round for a while, and then finally it just got decided, okay, fine, Duane can go. But he's bringing his wife, too. Fine. Okay. So this was going to be the first cruise in the 21-year history of the show where both of us got to go on a cruise together, which I think is grand. It's going to be a lot of fun,
Yep.
And so that didn't happen because of the COVIDs. 21 didn't happen because of the COVIDs. Now it's 2022. I'm still going. Why? I don't know, but I'm going. So because the two of us are gone, and I've got to rely on a piece of gear that has to rely on the ship's Wi-Fi, and as a backup, an EU cell stick tower with hopefully a SIM card that I buy in a store in Paris that will hopefully work. That should allow us to broadcast and hook up with the studio here. If for some reason, like any reason you could possibly think of, that the technology may not work or blink out here and there, Ed Morrissey is going to be standing by and basically co-hosting all day. And when we drop out, the inevitable dropout, Ed will make sure we don't have dead air.
Right.
Or at least that's the plan.
That's the plan. And I think it should work pretty well.
On the days when we are not able to broadcast, and there are, like the day we're flying over, there is a day where we've actually got to board the there's one day when we're actually doing an in Normandy tour or something where the time of day and all that stuff just doesn't work. Those days where we know we can't broadcast, Kurt Schlichter's going to fill in and guest host, because he'll just come in and break the furniture, and that's fine. I'll just come back and expense out new furniture when I get back. But Ed is the perfect guest host for bad tech days. And the reason why The reason why is because when we did debates, when Hugh did debates in the 2020 presidential cycle, we would bring Ed on by Zoom as a co-host. You know, he would come on with us, and you know, we would go to a commercial break, and he would say, "I got to go do NBC," and he would just take his headphones off and go do NBC. As we're coming back from a break, and Ed just instantly filled in and took the next segment over as though it was planned. It was like Morning Joe. Hugh did. It was like Morning Hugh, right?
Right. It was a lot of fun too.
And Ed Morrissey was playing the role of Willie Geist.
Well, that's what I like to do. I like to be Willie Geist.
So since we've kind of got that shtick down, I figured every day that we're supposed to broadcast, Ed will sit in and fill in with Hugh until, of course, we disappear, in which case you'll be listening to Ed.
Well, that's coming up. You can go to hughhewitt.com, by the way, to find out more about the Hugh cruise. I'm assuming the tickets are still available.
I think there may be a room or two left, just because I don't know if everybody rolled over. There may be, you know, who knows?
Right.
hughcruise.com is where you can go and get information. hughcruise.com.
hughcruise.com. And I'll have that up in the in the show post for the podcast when we do that later this afternoon. Duane can send me an email to remind me of that. Just really quickly, what's on Hugh's show tonight? Sorry, tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning.
Yeah, because this morning is actually tonight,
right,
where I'm at, or whatever. Anyway, no, tomorrow. Larry Arndt's going to be on from Hillsdale College, and it's not, you know, we're not doing Shakespeare. We're not doing one of the great books. Larry Arndt is spearheading a movement of creating charter school and private academies all over this country in grade schools that are being stocked now full of kids and parents that are disaffected from not just the mask mandates and all that nonsense, but what CRT is doing in schools. There is an entire educational reformatting going on. And Hillsdale College is right at the center of it. It's not just collegiate level. This is training academies getting the next generation through school and ready to learn the important stuff at Hillsdale. And it's a fascinating hour. We taped it last week. We're going to play it tomorrow. But it's a look at education that you really need to hear.
All right. Well, that's coming up. It's coming up on Friday morning. I'm not sure when you're listening or watching this, but it's coming up on Friday morning at hughhewitt.com. In the Huniverse, you can get the podcast. You can watch it live. Huniverse, HUGHNIVERSE.com. And we've got to wrap things up, but I want to thank Duane for being with us, and we'll talk to you again next week, sir.
Sounds like a plan. See you guys.
All right. Stand by for more from The Ed Morrissey Show. Welcome back to The Ed Morrissey Show. Joining me now is Robert Shibley of fire.org, thefire.org, and talking about free speech in colleges and universities and their top 10 worst colleges for free speech in 2022. Robert, welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show. It's been a long time since we've talked on Thames here.
It has. Thank you for having me.
Well, I wish that we had cheery news to discuss about free speech. It seems like it's really not. The cultural shared consensus about free speech seems to be unraveling all over the place. I mean, on Spotify, where you've got 60s hippies that used to want to take it to the man, who now suddenly want to enforce it for the man. You've got it on network television. And now, and it's always been a problem on college campuses. I mean, this is something that you guys track at thefire.org constantly. But, I mean, does it seem to be to you that it's getting worse these days rather than better?
Oh, yeah. I think, culturally speaking, it's gotten worse. And as social media has sort of come to dominate a lot of the culture, what improvement I think, and we were seeing at some point on maybe a few years ago on campuses has been replaced. Sort of the fear in many ways of the sort of campus peer pressure has been replaced with fear of worldwide peer pressure, and that, the idea that all of world social media can land on some random 19-year-old undergraduate if you say something that is politically supposedly wrong, and the wrong person finds out about it, you can be, persona non grata forever, is terrifying to students and faculty members, and frankly, just average Americans. And so it is a problem. At the same time, we have been seeing progress in terms of the actual policies that universities have on the books. Those have really been going in a good direction, but they don't mean much if universities aren't willing to stick to them, or if students are willing to take advantage of them.
Well, indeed. And again, Robert Shibley, of course, is the executive director of thefire.org. And I have to say that I think that the institutions that should be defending free speech are particularly bad at doing so. I'm talking about media outlets. I'm talking about, Spotify. There's the whole thing with Spotify, Neil Young, Joe Rogan. You can also say Whoopi Goldberg and ABC, because even though I think Whoopi Goldberg was an idiot and said idiotic and offensive things, she's paid to, I mean, I don't want to put it maybe quite as badly as this, but she's paid to offer idiotic commentary.
Well, she's on TV because presumably people want to hear her opinions. They tune in for it. Same with Joe Rogan, regardless of what you think of the folks he has on there. I think a big part of the attraction at this point for some of the outliers in terms of media who are willing to say things that most people won't say is that it gets more and more attractive the more difficult you make it to see someone, the more attractive it is. And this is, you learn this when you have kids, but you don't need to have kids to know this. If you tell somebody they can't do something, their first question is why. And if you don't have a good reason for them, a lot of times they're going to go and try and do it. And, I think there is no good reason for this cancel culture and censorship we have. And I can tell you also that it is a lot less popular actually with people across the political spectrum than most people believe. I think that data is going to continue to show that, but nobody, liberals, conservatives, independents, nobody of race. It's not something that has a majority, I think, support, according to some of our internal research and other polls you see out there. So, everybody is sort of afraid of something that it really just takes some fortitude to stand up to. And you're right, universities, they're actually in a great position to stand up to this. And we're talking institutions in some cases that are likely to be around after the United States is done. I mean, will there not be a Harvard if there's no Massachusetts? Right. They have more money than some countries. Same with Yale, same with Stanford. So they are in a place where they could stand by their principles. And the fact that they're not is extremely discouraging, and it sets a bad precedent for everybody else.
Well, I think it's also, there's lots of different cultural things we can read into this in terms of the colleges. We're going to get to the colleges themselves, though, first, because at thefire.org, they publish this list, I believe, every year. And so for 2022, Robert has a list of the 10 worst colleges for free speech. We're going to get to each one of these, but I think there's one that's really in the news now, which is Georgetown Law. Yeah. And they've suspended Ilya Shapiro over, probably a poorly worded tweet. I think you can say it's a poorly worded tweet that really doesn't reflect what Ilya Shapiro was actually trying to say in regards to the debate over whether or not Joe Biden was wise in choosing to say that he was committing to appointing a black woman to the Supreme Court. I actually happen to think that the controversy over Biden's choice is a little overblown, because it's not the first time that presidents have made pledges to do similar things. Reagan had a campaign pledge to appoint a woman at some point, although it wasn't necessarily going to be his first pick. It turned out to be his first pick. And, George H.W. Bush chose Clarence Thomas to fill the slot that had been set aside. Again, that's the wrong word, right? I'm next on the cancel list, apparently. That had been, Thurgood Marshall's seat. And I think it was pretty clear that Bush 41 really wanted to symbolically follow Thurgood Marshall with the second, black jurist on the Supreme Court. These are these are, you know, these are policies or choices that both parties have made. I think they're open to criticism, just like any other policies are. I think what's not open to criticism, though, should be beyond criticism, is the right to actually talk about these things because they're public policies. And even if you stumble over the text, I mean, the intent here was pretty clear. And yet Georgetown Law has suspended Ilya Shapiro, apparently is threatening to not follow through on his employment there, which I believe was just starting out. Is that right, Robert?
Yeah, he was supposed to start on February 1st, and so he started his job suspended, administratively suspended, and is being investigated by an outside law firm to see, I guess, if he's violated any policy. Georgetown has policies that guarantee free speech. It's pretty clear. I'm not really sure what the investigation would involve. It's about this tweet. Or this couple of tweets, like you said. I mean, Shapiro said, okay, that's not what I was trying to say. What I was trying to say is, I think Judge Srinivasan is the best possible progressive choice. And I think it logically follows. What he's saying is that everybody else would be a less good choice. He acknowledged that he put it in a bad way that could be mischaracterized. But I confess that, when I first read it, I think many people sort of filled in. I actually figured it was just a Twitter artifact of being too short, and
right,
that he a lesser qualified Black woman. Now, it's not Fire's job to judge what he meant. We know what he said he meant.
Right.
And that people can disagree. I mean, obviously, people can disagree on things like that and choose to interpret things the way they are, and we defend their right to do that. But it actually doesn't matter at all from the perspective of Georgetown. They made these promises and they are not keeping them. And by doing that, they are doing terrible damage to, I think, their reputation in many ways, but also to the willingness of people at Georgetown to speak out. I think it's very telling that there's a letter in support of his right to speak out on this political issue, authored by Eugene Volokh from UCLA, who's a well-known First Amendment attorney.
Yep. It's
got, I think, over 160, signers so far, and very few, if any, from Georgetown. I think there may be one. And so it kind of shows you what the environment is there. And people are not willing to cross this. And it's very disturbing because Georgetown is a very influential law school. It's the most influential one in our nation's capital. It has disproportionate influence. And to say that you can't discuss the makeup of the Supreme Court is really, I mean, I'm an attorney. It's really alarming. I can tell you that.
Right. And again, we're speaking with Robert Shibley, Executive Director of thefire.org. Robert, I agree with you. We don't want to get into the qualitative judgment of what Ilya Shapiro wrote.
And Fire tries to avoid that. Yeah, because
right,
we
exactly.
People from all sides. But, that doesn't mean that he should be excluded. And that's
right.
True for people all across this top 10 list, which has liberals, conservatives, people, issues that you can't really figure out who's upset about it. And it doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter when it comes to applying free speech principles.
Right, exactly. And this is the reason why I brought up the Whoopi Goldberg thing, because I found what she had to say extremely offensive, if for no other basis, intellectually offensive, because it was really, really stupid. I don't think she should have been suspended. I don't think that there was, I mean, if people don't want to watch The View, they don't need to watch The View. I would actually really encourage them to not watch The View in droves. But that beyond that, I don't like deplatforming. And yet when you take a look at thefire.org's list for 2022, you get the sense that deplatforming and silencing is really becoming a very common educational value. And not just at, some oddball private school that, that doesn't have any real implications. You mentioned Georgetown is an extremely influential private school. Georgetown, I believe, is at least nominally a Catholic school.
Yeah.
A lot of these are, you give Yale a Lifetime Achievement Award here, by the way, and not in a good way.
Yeah.
But But some of these are public universities, some of these are private universities. These are all well-known universities. Stanford leads off the list.
That's right. Stanford, if you want to go from the other side, this was about 3 weeks after the January 6th Capitol riots. A student sent around a satirical email listserv to the law students listserv for a fake Federalist Society event, the Federalist Society being the sort of conservative / libertarian organization of attorneys. And it said they were having an event called the Originalist Case for Inciting Insurrection. It was scheduled for January 6th, which was 3 weeks in the past at that point, and said it would feature Senator Josh Hawley and Texas AG Ken Paxton, suggesting they were going to do a coup. And Stanford actually went after him and opened an investigation and placed a hold on his diploma 2 weeks before he was supposed to graduate. This one was widely condemned. It was very obviously satirical. There was no way somebody could have taken this seriously for more than a few seconds, which is often how satire works. And in fact, it's sort of the closer, the more realistic it looks, sometimes the more effective it is. That's okay. Right. But in this case, I think it was, everybody thinks it was pretty obvious. We've seen the email. And Stanford nevertheless opened this investigation. And that itself is part of the punishment. And we're seeing that, with Ilya Shapiro as well. But if you're going to be investigated whenever somebody gets very upset about what you're saying and can make some kind of argument that you violated a policy, and there's going to be a whole full-blown investigation, you will logically avoid speaking out on those issues. That's called the chilling effect. It's both logical and obvious and also recognized by the court. And yet, Stanford fell right into that trap. Now they did, reverse themselves, fairly quickly, although, certainly not quickly enough. They should have just refused. But we also see, like you said, and these suspensions and investigations, whether it's inside or outside colleges, I think in many cases, they're used to make the process the punishment, right? So, maybe you're not going to be fired. Maybe you won't lose your diploma. Maybe you are. But you will think twice before you say anything again, because every time there's an investigation, that goes in your file and everybody assumes you did something wrong. And the next time, you have even less protection if there is a next time.
Yeah, that's a great point, Robert. And I do remember the Federalist thing too, because I like the Federalist Society. I think they're a fine organization. Me being a sort of a conservative / somewhat libertarian guy, I follow what they do, and I think they do good work. And at the time, and right up to right now, I was thinking, man, these guys really need to get a sense of humor. I mean, they really need to get a sense of humor.
Students are not necessarily known for having the best sense of humor. They can be pretty serious folks, although it really depends on the law student. But at the same time, and it's important to remember that, and FIRE tries to put this, it's natural for people to complain when you say something that really aggravates them. And it's not people's responsibility not to complain or not to demand these kinds of things, although it would be better for them not to. I think it's better for a free society when we don't all jump to, I want that person shut up forever. So I think it is important, but it's not their legal responsibility to do it. It is Stanford's responsibility and Georgetown's responsibility, these other group, to say, I understand, but we're not going to do that because that's not the arrangement that we have as people who care about free speech. And I think it goes also to what you're saying about Spotify and ABC or whoever all else it is. Even though, those are private companies, Stanford, they don't have the kind of promises of free expression that Stanford and Georgetown do and that sort of thing. They're private companies. And often people will say, what's your problem? It's not a First Amendment problem. It's a private company. They can do whatever they want. But that ignores the very obvious implications for our culture. It ignores the implications in many cases of the sort of scale of a lot of the decisions they make. This isn't, some random pizza joint. This is ABC or it's Spotify. I mean, Facebook or Twitter, whatever it is. So what they do does have a real ramifications for our society. And so I do think they have, a moral responsibility, at the very least, to think about what the ramifications of the decisions they make are. And I think that's not happening frequently enough.
Right. I agree. And I think that you're exactly right about this, that there is there's a moral consensus, there's a cultural consensus that has to be cultivated in order to prevent these types of encroachments occurring in other places. I mean, if you're making your money in the free speech venue, and there's no doubt that Spotify is making their money in the free speech context, and that ABC makes its money in a free speech context, then you should be at least leaning towards defending the cultural consensus around free speech in order to safeguard it. So for no other reason, so it doesn't erode out from under your own feet. And I think that's certainly the most craven way to put it.
But I mean, you would expect self-interest, to dictate that. And historically it has, but I think we're seeing sort of a breakdown of that incentive structure in some ways, or maybe just a lack of realization. But you're right. I think it aggravates people more when it is a media corporation or a university or some other sort of a museum, some sort of cultural institution than it would if it were somebody making widgets. Right. And I think that's, to say that it's the same thing if, somebody gets fired from being a shoemaker, it's bad. I think it's bad for that person in both cases. I don't, but I think it makes sense that people would see that differently, and to pretend that they shouldn't because, it's a private corporation or whatever. Again, I'm not saying this is a legal thing, but from a cultural perspective, I think people understand it has ramifications when these folks do it that it doesn't in other circumstances.
Absolutely. So, absolutely. I don't want to like blow through the whole list here because I want people to go to thefire.org, but I have to talk about Emerson because I think this is free speech in a completely different context. First off, stupider. But what we see in some of these other instances is complaints about free speech restrictions and speech codes that are imposed in a partisan manner on inside the American political context. Emerson's speech codes in this particular instance, which landed it on the top 10 this year, wasn't even in service to one side or the other side in this. It was on the side of the People's Republic of China. Tell us a little bit about this Emerson case and how ridiculous this got.
Yeah, we had a hard time believing this when this came across what we saw, but a chapter of Turning Point USA, which is a conservative college group, the National College Group, was handing out stickers that had a picture of the Among Us guy, which I'm sure we've all seen, had a hammer and sickle on it and said, "China kinda sus." And sus is, what you say, I hear from my kids, when you think somebody is suspicious in Among Us. And so they're just passing out these stickers. They're, maybe about as big as your hand. And apparently somebody brought this to the attention of the administration and they condemned the stickers, saying that they expressed anti-China hate, that it might have violated their bias policy, and they launched an investigation. They also suspended the TPUSA chapter, finding that they did not intend to target anyone other than China's government. But nevertheless, the bias-related behavior policy somehow covers the Chinese Communist Party itself, as opposed to saying things that are actually racist towards Chinese people. TPUSA appealed. Nothing. Emerson does not care. Then they started hiding comments that were online on their various, social media pages that were critical of them. And, it's so ridiculous, but part of it, and I think it has some special relevance right now with the Olympics kicking off soon, is there are real concerns, I think, with this sort of, globalization of a lot of things, globalization of censorship and the sort of import of policies from repressive regimes has been a problem. One of the things that hit us at Fire early on, and I'll try to be brief about it, hit Fire early on is students from Hong Kong particularly, but also mainland China who ordinarily travel to the United States to go to school here. They were having to do it remotely, but there were concerns that because the Chinese government said that they might be monitoring Zoom and other online classes and seeing what was discussed. Right. So now what that does is it warps. What that tells professors is if I don't want to get, my student, I might have a student in Hong Kong Am I going to discuss what's going on there and put them potentially in peril of being jailed? No. So all of a sudden the curriculum changes too, because of the authoritarian government of communist China and other authoritarian governments as well, particularly in the Middle East. And so it is a real problem that I think has not yet been dealt with to an extent. And you have to wonder when you see things like this, whether, what kind of components are going on there. So I don't have any evidence of that. And I'm not even suggesting that Emerson is in bed with the Chinese Communist Party. But we have seen this in other areas, and criticism of China is, for whatever reason, particularly perilous right now on college campuses. And it's something we need to be, concerned and thinking about.
Well, I think so too, and that's what's so valuable about the fire.org, is because they not only are highlighting these issues, but they're actually actively defending the students and organizations whose free speech rights are trampled. They're the ones that are helping out on the front line to restore those freedoms and to allow for free speech on college campuses. Now, we've gone through 3 of the 10, so I think 30% is a pretty good number, Robert. But I have to ask you: does the fire.org publish an annual list of the top 10, or at least the handful of institutions of higher learning that might be doing it right on campus?
We do have various ways that we tend to highlight universities. So I believe we have had a top 10 best universities, or at least we suggest them. But I think the best place to go is our campus climate rankings. We actually interview 37,000 students, or we take a poll, statistically significant, at 159 colleges, and we're going to grow that again the coming year. And you can see what students actually think about those universities for the first time ever. And we've only done year 2 of it. And you can see which colleges are the best. I can tell you the 2 best so far are Claremont McKenna out in California and the University of Chicago.
Really? The University of Chicago. Good for them. That's great. We should make more mention of that, because Chicago gets a bad rap for lots of different reasons. But University of Chicago, congratulations. Actually, Michelle Obama's alma mater.
They do, and I think that's in both of those cases. Both of those colleges have overwhelmingly left-leaning students, more so than most universities. But the leadership there has set forth a principle that they are not going to censor on the demand of students or professors or any of the outside. And they've actually made that clear to students, and students tend to support it, and they believe that they have those protections. And that also shows one last thing, which is that the leadership really counts, the decisions they make really counts, and that, a lot of people are worried, and I think with some justification, about the bias, whether it be faculty, professors, administrators, students in academia. But you can have a university that is very left-leaning or very right-leaning, and that still respects the minorities' rights to speak their views, if you want to do it. And what we need is more colleges and more institutions that want to do that.
And you know how you can help do that? You can go to thefire.org, take a look at their resources to keep involved, take a look at how you can get involved. It's another header there. You can join the Fire Faculty Network. You can join the Fire's High School Educator Network. You can donate to Fire, by the way. But there's all sorts of different ways that you can be involved in the defense of free speech on campuses around the country, both high school and college. And thefire.org is how you do that. Robert Shibley, Executive Director of thefire.org. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Ed.
Stay tuned for more from the Ed Morrissey Show. We'll be right back. This is Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com for Townhall. The era of big mandates is over, NBC News declared, after 6 blue states acted to reverse indoor mask mandates over the past few days. Starting in New Jersey, Democratic governors in 5 states rolled back COVID-19 mandates after facing voter anger and parental fury over requirements that never had a firm basis in science in the first place. With the Omicron wave of cases fast receding, it appeared for a brief moment that the White House got the message. Instead, the CDC used a hastily arranged press briefing on Wednesday to announce that their guidance wouldn't change at all. Despite the hint from NBC and the clear message from voters across the political spectrum, the Biden White House wants to cling to mandates rather than shift to an endemic posture on COVID-19. A reporter asked Jen Psaki whether the CDC risked becoming irrelevant to Americans as states begin ignoring their outdated guidance. She essentially just doubled down. The Biden administration has proven its irrelevance. The administration will get left behind. Americans are done with big mandates. I'm Ed Morrissey. Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show. I am happy to introduce one of my friends, both in and out of politics, Myra Kahn Adams, who has got it's not a new book out. It's been out for a few months, but it's a terribly interesting project for Myra, who's really been doing some great work in the faith sphere. And this is called Bible Study for Those Who Don't Read the Bible, which is, Myra, itself a somewhat interesting concept. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Myra, it's always a delight talking with you. And it's always so much fun having these conversations. And I mean, I don't know that people are going to say, oh, Bible study. How much fun can you get out of Bible study? Well, if you're asking that question, you simply don't know Myra Kahn Adams. I mean, that's Am I correct about this? This is going to be enjoyable as well as informative, right?
Entertaining. We're all into the Bible is entertainment. One thing that really needs to be said is the title says it all. If you don't read the Bible and you don't know anything about the Bible, even though it is the world's greatest book, most best-selling book, the book that changed history forever and continues to change history and change the world forever, it's intimidating. It's an extremely intimidating book. And people who never read it, never picked it up, don't know anything about the Bible, have, no faith, as we call the unchurched, are the last people to want to pick up the Bible. They don't even know where to begin. So just the title makes it kind of user-friendly. And the way that the book is constructed, first of all, it never started out to be a book, which is why it's kind of loopy in the sense that you can pick this book up anywhere and pick any page, just go pick it up and you can start reading a chapter that has nothing to do with the chapter before or the chapter afterwards, because the book is a compilation of my Sunday townhall.com Bible study that started weekly in February of 2020. And luckily, readers liked it and started reading it, and Townhall continued it because, as we know, Townhall is a political, secular, conservative website that is not at all faith-driven in its content. And it's the last place you'd really expect to see a weekly Bible study. But they took a chance, and it basically has caught an audience because, surprise, conservatives oftentimes have faith. And those that don't have faith, may be attracted by the titles of the different weekly series. But the actual book is Bible Study for Those Who Don't Read the Bible. But the weekly series is called A Quick, Compelling Bible Study. In fact, the first 2 volumes that I wrote, I call them volumes, the different studies, were actually called Bible Study for Those Who Don't Read the Bible. But then I got into Quick, Compelling because it just gives me an easier way to then introduce the topic of the week. So that's that part of it.
Yeah, I mean, you're right about this, about the Bible being a daunting book for those who haven't been familiar with it, didn't grow up in it. And I want you to, I know you got a copy of your book there. You got to hold up a copy of your book just to show how welcoming and friendly it is. I'm going to let you speak here. Keep holding it up because right now the camera's on me, but we're going to go ahead and flip the camera back to you as you talk about how friendly this is, how accessible this actually is.
So it's not, and it gets in the light a little better. And let me know when it's on.
Oh yeah, you're there.
Okay, so you notice what's on top here. I have a Jewish star with a cross in it, and that alone can make heads explode. But I am a Messianic Jew. I was born and raised Jewish. And I came to Christ in 1975 when I was in college. I'm dating myself. But anyway, I write the Bible studies from the perspective of being a Messianic Jew, also my journey, my faith journey as a Protestant, and then an evangelical, and now I attend Catholic church. So I really, I call myself a no labels lover of Christ. And the Bible study is actually reflecting all my different ways that I look at the Lord, but I try not to have labels because I don't like labels. Honestly, I don't like denominations. I just think the Bible is the word of God, and it shouldn't be through the lens of your denomination. It is what it is, and denominations should not matter. So I write the Bible study from that perspective. I just write about the word of the Lord and what we're supposed to learn from it. And that's it. So is my shameless self-promotion part over now?
Oh, no, not at all. We're going to continue shameless self-promotion.
Glue it to my head.
We are going to continue the Myra Kahn Adams shameless promotion, because it's not just self-promotion. I'm promoting this as well.
Right,
This is... Bible studies are always tricky. And I'm glad that you talk about the ecumenism that you've put into this, because, I write Sunday Reflections, and I've been doing this now for about 7-8 years, I guess, at Hot Air. And I do try to be careful about being as ecumenical as I possibly can, because I know that our reader base is not strictly Catholic. I'm Catholic, so obviously and I have a Catholic perspective on this, Catholic theological perspective on these, but I try to be very careful to be as inclusive as possible. And it's very clear that that's exactly what you want to do with Bible study for those who don't read the Bible.
Yes, or the main thing is that you want to diminish the amount of hate mail that you're going to get.
Yeah.
The amount of
Good luck with
comments.
that.
Yeah,
Good luck
I know.
with that.
Exactly. Okay, could I take this down now so I don't have to sit here the whole time and hold?
Yes, you can take that down.
Hold it again at the end. I do want to note that Harry Hargrave, who's the president of the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., wrote the foreword to it. So that was very nice of him.
It was
okay,
very nice.
Putting this down now, and okay, now I can resume my position straight on here.
Straight On with Myra Kahn Adams. That's going to be the name of her new podcast. Straight On with Myra Kahn Adams. All right, Myra. There's a lot of Bible studies in the marketplace, obviously, and some of them are very broad. Some of them are very focused on certain aspects of the Bible. There's a series of these. You've been doing this for a long time at Townhall, as you say.
2 years. 2 years.
For 2 years, yeah. And as you say, this is a compilation of some of the things that you're doing there. I know that you're continuing to do these. So even though this book was published in September of last year, you're continuing to do the quick and compelling Bible studies at Townhall.
Mm-hmm. Every Sunday. In fact, in 2 weeks, it will be volume 100, my 100th study, which is shocking because I didn't think I'd go beyond 2. And the other thing that's interesting, it was readers. It was actually Townhall readers that would send me emails and write comments and say, this should be a book. We really enjoy your studies. You should make this into a book. And of course, I ignored that for months. And then I just got too many of them. So I decided, okay, I guess it's a sign. I'm supposed to be putting this in a book. And I did. I actually went through Zulon, which is a self-publishing company that's owned by Salem, which owns Townhall,
right?
Which owns Hot Air, and they're a
it's the empire.
It's the empire.
It's the Salem Empire.
It's a Christian-oriented empire.
It is, yeah,
which is
actually
great. Very good. So anyway, so in fact, the second book will be coming out later this year because I'm going to take volumes 57 through 100, and it will be part 2. This book, hold it up one more time. This book covers volumes 1 through 56. And then the next book will be volumes 57 through 100. And in 2 weeks, as I said, the 100th study will be written. So, but anyway, the main thing is that I try to make it a user-friendly Bible study, and also I try to connect the Old Testament and the New Testament, and bring out some of the colorful characters in the Bible, some of the prayers that perhaps will help someone who happens to stumble upon it at Townhall on a given Sunday and reads it and said, wow, I'm really touched by what was written, and encourage them to study more. I mean, that's really my overall objective, is encourage people to study the Bible more and give them a foothold
Right.
into the Bible.
Yeah, and just, of course, Townhall is a politics site. Salem does actually both conservative politics as well as, Christian broadcasting. They're primarily a Christian broadcaster, in fact.
Yes, they are.
Politics really isn't entering into this, right? I mean, this is, I think that you and I sort of have the same approach to this, is that the Bible's the Bible. And when we're discussing the Bible and doing Bible, doing Bible analysis and Bible study, we're outside of the politics realm. And I think people are going to be very comfortable coming to Bible study for those who don't read the Bible, regardless of their political orientation.
Yes, I really try to just write about the Word of God and not talk about the politics of the day, even though the site that I'm on, townhall.com, is all about politics
right.
all the time. But I'm just a little peaceful oasis on Sundays. And ironically, if anyone, your readers read Townhall, they notice that on the left-hand corner is all the op-eds. So my piece runs as one of the op-eds. So of course it runs, between, some very political op-eds. So I really do like to think I'm a peaceful oasis and a break from all the noise and all the red meat and all the polarization that goes on throughout our society right now, and that goes on all political sites, no matter whether they're right leaning or left leaning. The heat is just on, and
right.
So my weekly study just tries to just put that all aside.
I'm wondering if you see this. You talk about a peaceful oasis. By the way, Myra, I've known you for years. You're always a peaceful oasis. I just want to throw that in there.
Not all the time.
This is not shameless self-promotion now. It's turned into a whole love fest going on here. But I mean, more seriously, I'm not sure how you approach this. I approach this in terms of what I do, and I'm not going to put those in a book. They're just on the hot air site. But I approached it as almost a way to honor the Sabbath, the Christian version of the Sabbath, by focusing any work that I'm doing most weekends on just the Word of God, and that's it. I mean, I try not to get into politics on Twitter. This is something I learned from Dennis Prager. Dennis Prager is the one who emphasized the need for people to honor the Sabbath, to follow the Ten Commandments, regardless of which day you recognize being the Sabbath, that it's imperative for people of faith, in Judeo-Christian faith of all denominations, to honor the Sabbath. And I thought very deeply about that. And I realized that I really did need to do that, even as imperfectly as I did. And I'm wondering if that was informing some of your decisions to do this on Sundays, and even though it's in the political mix, which my stuff is at hot air too. It's all mixed up with all the rest of the stuff there on Sundays. Is that it's at least your personal way of really just keeping the Sabbath holy to whatever extent that you can do.
I wish that's what happened, but that's not what happened. Seriously, it was a high-ranking Salem executive that suggested that I write a faith piece on Sunday at Townhall, because I'd written a piece about the Shroud of Turin, and that was very popular. And then he said, "Hey, you should write a faith piece on Townhall on Sundays." So that's what happened. This is really something that just came about. The hand of God was definitely on this,
right?
And thanks to the readers at Townhall as well. But one thing about the Sabbath that I think is interesting, I'm old enough, and perhaps you are old enough too, that when I grew up in Boston. I grew up in a suburb of Boston. And on Sundays, they used to have what was called blue laws.
Oh, yeah.
And literally nothing was open. I mean, except for maybe, a convenience store here and there, but there even weren't that many of those. Maybe a gas station. But for the most part, nothing was open. You did not go shopping. There was no shopping malls open. There was nothing open. There weren't even that many shopping malls at that time. But anyway, the honoring the Sabbath was just part of our society in our culture for decades and decades. And ultimately, what ended up happening is I guess this happened when I was in high school, or I forget exactly the year it happened, but I remember that all of a sudden everything started getting open on Sunday. And the reason I heard was because New Hampshire, which of course borders Massachusetts, people from Massachusetts who wanted to go shopping on Sunday would go to New Hampshire. So Massachusetts was losing out of tax revenue, sales tax revenue.
Right.
So they decided to start opening up stores on Sunday. That's what happened. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
And then it just, now it's like probably people who are a lot younger than you and I can't even imagine stores being closed on Sunday, except they think about something like this. Chick-fil-A is closed on Sunday. And, they honor the Sabbath, and certainly they lose millions of dollars in business, but they don't care because they're going to honor the Sabbath. So, I mean, that's kind of a throwback, to the way it always was.
It is, and it's funny because that wasn't that way in California when I was growing up. I don't recall there being any sort of particular store closures or blue laws. California, I think, really didn't have that. But I moved to Minnesota, and I was 34 years old when I moved to Minnesota, and they still had blue laws. In fact, to this day, you can't open a car dealership on a Sunday.
Wow.
It's and among the biggest proponents of that are car dealerships. As it turns out, they don't want to be open on Sundays because it's going to cost them more to be open on Sundays, but also, and this is just an aside, I mean, this is like trivia now. They believe they sell a lot of cars on Sundays by just having people go to the lots knowing they won't be bothered and wandering the lots and finding cars they like. And so at least that was what it was before, I moved out of Minnesota last year.
To Texas.
To Texas.
The great state of
Texas. Indeed, I almost want to do the deep in the heart of Texas. But and I don't know what the blue law situation is or was down here, but it was a big deal in Minnesota. You couldn't do alcohol sales on Sundays. Liquor stores, up until very recently, liquor stores had to be closed on Sundays. So, I mean, Minnesota actually, as progressive as that state is, those blue laws were around while I was living there. So, yeah. All right. So getting back to the book, Bible Study for Those Who Don't Read the Bible. We've got a couple minutes left. Is this structure in this book sort of like a weekly thing too, as it was in the columns? Is something you work through week by week, or you can just kind of go at your own pace? How did you frame this in the book?
I just basically put the columns in there, and I give the date that it was posted, and they just follow each other. Volume 1 through 56. But the topics are not at all related. They're on occasion, I will do a topic that demands more than 1,000 words. And of course, that's also something that you need to consider. I mean, these Bible studies, because they are on Townhall, I mean, I really can't have them go over 1,000 words. I maybe a little bit here and there, but for the most part, it's about 1,000 words. So, they do have to be short. And sometimes I will have a topic like, what the Bible says about water. Okay, but I'll do what the Old Testament says about water and what the New Testament says about water, and it will be one Sunday after another. But for the most part, each one of them is just independent, and even those are independent because I try to then relate it back to the one the week before. But they're all independent. I mean, you can just pick them up anywhere, and I've had actually a lot of readers say to me how much they really like that. I mean, they just kind of thumb through it and pick out whatever topic.
And it looks like we might have lost Myra. Myra, are you back with us? We might have lost Myra there. Anyway, the book is Bible Study for Those Who Don't Read the Bible. We'll be back later with Myra on a completely different topic, so stay tuned. We're going to be doing a couple topics with Myra. Bible study. Oh, there we go. There you go. You're back. You froze up there for just a moment, Myra. I was just about ready to wrap up, but I'll let you get in a last word here, and then we'll wrap this segment up.
Okay, it says I just got a line across that says my connection is unstable. Okay, at least I'm not unstable.
You're not unstable.
My connection's unstable. But anyway, the point is anyone can pick up this book at any topic. And it's not at all connected because I felt like I get like called. I mean, I literally have these ding dings, and I write them in the different columns. I just feel like the Lord's calling me to write about a certain topic, and that's the topic I write about, and that's the way it is. So it's not at all connected. This is not your typical Bible study, and I think that's why it became popular in Townhall, and why the book has started to be popular, because people just maybe are, again, intimidated if they've never read the Bible before. So this is definitely a way that just welcomes everybody, and you can know nothing, because I write from the perspective of me as a kid. I did not know anything. I thought Palm Sunday was about glorifying palm trees, and Good Friday was a Friday in spring that was good. And I'm not exaggerating. I knew nothing. I grew up in a house without a Bible. I literally knew nothing. And was that really until I was about 21. I started getting into it more when I believe I was called to be a Christian. But other than that, I knew nothing. So I write this really for, as I say, for young Myra. So there you go.
All right. Bible study for those who don't read the Bible. You can get it on Amazon.com. You can get it probably on Barnes & Noble. You can get it wherever fine books are sold. Myra Kahn Adams, thanks for being with us. We will come back on another topic very soon.